Information like the patient's name, allergies, and surgical procedure may be verified several times. All information is kept confidential. Everyone is concerned for the patient's comfort and safety. The patient's privacy is respected. In the pre-op holding room, the nurse will begin to prepare the patient for surgery. An IV may be started, and excess hair from the incision site can be removed. The goal is to minimize the patient's exposure to infectious microorganisms during the surgical procedure. Traffic patterns divide the operating room suite into 3 specific areas, defined by the activity that takes place there. These areas are called unrestricted, semi-restricted, and restricted. Unrestricted areas include a control point where personnel monitor the entrance of patients, personnel, and materials. Here, information is communicated between the surgical suite and the rest of the healthcare facility. Street clothes are permitted in unrestricted areas. Beyond the unrestricted areas, surgical attire must be worn. Closed doors, signs, or barrier markers indicate the division between these areas. Semi-restricted areas include peripheral support areas, such as workrooms for processing and storage of instruments, corridors through the restricted areas, and storage for clean and sterile supplies. Surgical attire is required in semi-restricted areas, but a mask is not necessary. In restricted areas, surgical procedures are performed and unwrapped supplies are sterilized. These areas include the operating rooms, clean core, sub-sterile areas, and areas where flash sterilizers are housed. In some facilities, the halls outside the operating room may be considered restricted. Masks must be worn in this area whenever sterile supplies are open. Personal protective equipment, such as goggles or face shields, may also be worn. The circulating nurse and scrub nurse work together to prepare the operating room for the surgical procedure. Together, they check the supplies and instruments that have been assembled. They use a list that includes everything needed for the procedure. This is called a physician's preference card or a pick list. The surgical pack is opened to create an area that is free of microorganisms that can cause infection. This is called a sterile field. Only the surface of the draped back table is considered sterile. Everything below table level is considered contaminated. Any sterile item that comes in contact with a non-sterile object or falls below table level is considered contaminated and must be discarded and replaced.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
The circulating nurse and scrub person count the instruments, needles, sponges, and sharps at various stages of the surgical procedure to ensure patient safety. While the scrub person continues preparation for the procedure, the circulating nurse interviews the patient in the holding area.
My name is Susan. I'll be your nurse for your surgery.
It is important that each member of the team introduces themselves to the patient.
And ask you a few questions. Could you tell me what's your name?
Bob Smith.
Okay.
By reviewing the chart, the history and physical, anesthesia note, and the nurse's notes, the circulating nurse learns more about the patient's medical conditions and concerns. The nurse shares specific information with the other members of the team as necessary and continues the plan of care.